Leela Parker had always been good with people. She wasn't the kind of person who craved attention or loud applause. Instead, she found joy in small moments, like seeing a patient smile after days of pain, or hearing someone laugh because they forgot for a second that life could hurt. That was why nursing felt right to her. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it gave her a sense of purpose. And Lila needed that more than anything. The private medical facility where she worked sat on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. It wasn't a hospital exactly. It was more like a fancy rest home for wealthy patients who required round-the-clock care. Most of them were elderly, though there were exceptions. One of those exceptions was Daniel Kessler. He'd been brought here 3 years ago, unconscious and unresponsive. After an accident no one talked about much. The staff didn't know much about him either. He was just another name on their list. But not to Lila. To Lila, Daniel was different. Maybe it was the way he looked so peaceful lying there, almost as if he were simply sleeping instead of trapped in a coma. Or maybe it was the fact that nobody ever came to visit him. No family members, no friends, not even business associates. Just silence. Lila couldn't imagine what it must feel like to have all the money in the world, but no one to share it with. So every night, when her shift started, she made sure to spend extra time with him. She would change his clothes, adjust his pillows, and clean his room. Sometimes she'd read books aloud to him, old classics like To Kill, A Mockingbird, or newer ones like The Martian. Other nights, she'd play soft jazz through a little speaker she kept in her bag. Miles Davis was her favorite, and she liked to think Daniel might appreciate it too. Once she even told him about her own life, the struggles with student loans, the cramped apartment she shared with 2 roommates, and her dream of opening a wellness clinic someday. Of course, he never responded. But still, talking to him made her feel less alone. It wasn't until her 4th month working at the facility that Lila realized something unusual about Daniel. His file said he was 42 years old, but he didn't look it. There were no wrinkles on his face, no gray hairs peeking out from under his blankets. Even after months of being bedridden, his body seemed strong, like he could wake up any day and start running marathons again. And then there were the machines hooked up to him. They weren't standard-issue monitors you'd find in a regular hospital. These were sleek, shiny things with blinking lights and screens, displaying numbers Lila couldn't understand. When she asked Dr. Harper, the head physician, about them, he only shrugged and said they were special equipment. Special equipment? For what? Lila wanted to ask, but she knew better than to push. People didn't come to this place unless they had secrets worth hiding. Whatever Daniel's secret was, it wasn't hers to uncover. All she could do was take care of him the best way she knew how. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, Lila changed Daniel's diapers. It wasn't glamorous work, but she didn't mind. Everyone deserved dignity, whether they were awake or asleep. As she gently rolled him onto his side, she'd hum softly to herself or tell him stories about her day. "You wouldn't believe what happened today," she said once, smiling despite herself. "Mrs. Henderson threw a fit because we ran out of chocolate pudding. Can you believe that? Chocolate pudding." She laughed quietly, imagining how ridiculous it must sound to anyone listening. Then again, maybe Daniel liked hearing about normal things. Maybe it reminded him of a time before whatever landed him here. Sometimes, late at night, when the halls were empty and the other nurses were busy with their own tasks, Leela would sit by Daniel's bedside and just watch him breathe. Inhale, exhale, over and over again. It was comforting in a strange way, like proof that even in the darkest moments, life went on. She wondered what he dreamed about, if he dreamed at all. Did he see flashes of memories, snippets of conversations? Or was his mind completely blank, floating somewhere between worlds? One evening, while adjusting his foredrip, Leela noticed something odd. Daniel's fingers twitched. Not a big movement, just a tiny flicker, barely noticeable unless you were looking closely. Her heart skipped a beat. Was that normal? She checked his vitals. Everything seemed fine. Still, she decided to mention it to Doctor Harper during rounds. Probably nothing, he said dismissively, scribbling notes on his clipboard. Muscle spasms are common in comatose patients. Don't worry about it. But Lila did worry. Not because she thought something bad was happening, but because she hoped something good might be. What if Daniel woke up tomorrow? What if he opened his eyes and smiled at her? She imagined the moment vividly. Sunlight streaming through the window, birds chirping outside, and Daniel saying thank you in a voice warm enough to melt glaciers. It was silly, she knew, unrealistic, but dreaming cost nothing, and Lila had plenty of dreams. That night, as she tucked Daniel back into bed after changing his sheets, she whispered, "I hope you're happy wherever you are." She paused, biting her lip. "And if you can hear me, well, I hope you know you're not alone." The next morning, Lila arrived at work feeling unusually tired. She hadn't slept well, plagued by restless thoughts about Daniel and his mysterious past. Had he really been in a car crash like the rumors suggested? Or was it something else entirely? Something darker? She shook her head, trying to focus. Speculation wouldn't help anyone. Besides, today was just another ordinary day, or so she thought as she entered Daniel's room, carrying a tray with fresh bandages and antiseptic wipes. Something caught her eye. His hand had moved. Not a twitch this time, but a deliberate gesture. Slowly, his fingers curled inward, forming a loose fist. Lila froze, her breath catching in her throat. She set the tray down and stepped closer, her pulse racing. "Daniel?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. For a moment, Lila thought she was imagining things. But then, slowly, his eyes opened. They were a deep shade of brown, framed by thick lashes. He blinked several times, squinting against the light. Then he turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze. For a split second, neither of them spoke. Lila's mind raced with questions. Should she call for help? Press the emergency button? Run screaming down the hallway? Before she could decide, Daniel broke the silence. "Where?" "Am I?" he croaked, his voice rough and uneven. Lila swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "You're in a medical facility," she replied softly. "You've been here for a long time." He frowned, confusion etched across his face. "How long?" 3 years, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, suddenly, he closed his eyes and let out a shaky breath. 3 years. He murmured, almost to himself. "It feels like longer." Lila didn't know what to say. She reached for the call button, ready to summon Dr. Harper, but Daniel stopped her with a weak wave of his hand. "No," he said hoarsely. "Wait, please." She hesitated, her finger hovering over the button. "Are you in pain? Do you need anything?" He shook his head faintly. "Just give me a minute." They sat in silence for a while, Lila perched nervously on the edge of her seat, watching as Daniel processed the reality of his situation. His breathing grew steadier, and some color returned to his cheeks. Finally, he opened his eyes again and looked at her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lila," she replied. "Lila Parker." He nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. "Thank you, Lila," he said, his voice stronger now, "for taking care of me." Tears welled up in her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. "You're welcome," she whispered. "But how did you wake up? How are you feeling?" Daniel hesitated, his brow furrowing. "I don't know," he admitted. "I remember fragments, pieces of things, but they don't make sense." Before Lila could press further, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Nurses rushed past the door, shouting orders and exchanging worried glances. Clearly, word had spread that Daniel Kessler, the man who'd lain motionless for 3 years, was awake. Leela stood up quickly, torn between staying with him and alerting the staff. Sensing her dilemma, Daniel gave her a small, reassuring smile. "It's okay," he said. "Go. I'll be here when you get back." With a final glance at him, Lila hurried out of the room, her mind buzzing with questions. Who was this man really? And what had he seen in those 3 lost years? Would you like me to format this text into a downloadable document such as a Word opening parenthesis .docx or PDF file? If yes, please confirm, and I'll guide you through the process. Lila's heart raced as she stepped into the hallway, where nurses and doctors were already gathering. The alarms had brought everyone running, and whispers filled the air like static. She didn't wait long before heading straight to Dr. Harper, who was barking orders at the staff. "Dr. Harper," Lila said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Daniel Kessler is awake." The doctor stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening behind his glasses. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if he hadn't heard correctly. Then, without another word, he pushed past her and hurried toward Daniel's room. Lila followed close behind, her mind spinning with questions. How could this happen after 3 years? What did it mean? When they entered the room, Daniel was still lying in bed, but his eyes were wide open now, scanning the space around him. He looked confused but alert, taking in every detail, the machines beeping beside him, the sterile white walls, the people crowding into the room. Dr. Harper approached cautiously, pulling out his stethoscope. "Mr. Kessler," he began, his tone calm but firm. "Can you hear me?" Daniel blinked slowly, then nodded. "Yes," he said, his voice clearer than before. "I can hear you." The doctor moved closer, checking his vitals. "How do you feel? Any pain? Dizziness?" "No," Daniel replied. "Just tired and disoriented." Dr. Harper nodded, jotting notes on his clipboard. Then he turned to Lila. "Nurse Parker, stay here. Assist me." His voice left no room for argument. For the next hour, the room buzzed with activity. Nurses checked Daniel's blood pressure, temperature, and reflexes. Someone brought in a portable X-ray machine, while another wheeled in a cart loaded with tools Lila didn't recognize. Through it all, Daniel remained surprisingly calm, answering questions when asked, but mostly watching silently. His gaze lingered on Lila more than once, and each time their eyes met, she felt a strange mix of curiosity and unease. Finally, Dr. Harper stepped back, looking both amazed and baffled. "Everything seems normal," he muttered, almost to himself. "Better than normal, actually. Your recovery rate is unprecedented." Daniel frowned, clearly struggling to process what was happening. "What happened to me?" he asked, his voice low. "Why was I asleep for so long?" The doctor hesitated, glancing at Lila before responding. "You were in an accident. A car crash, according to the records. Severe head trauma. You've been in a coma ever since." "A coma?" Daniel repeated, his brow furrowing. "That explains some things, but not everything." "What do you mean?" Lila asked before she could stop herself. He looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I remember bits and pieces, flashes of something, but they don't make sense. Like I was somewhere else entirely." "Somewhere else?" Dr. Harper echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Like dreams?" Daniel shook his head. "Not dreams, more like memories. Of places I've never been, people I don't know, technologies that haven't been invented yet." He paused, searching for the right words. "It's hard to explain." The room fell silent. Leela exchanged a glance with Dr. Harper, who seemed unsure how to respond. Finally, he cleared his throat. We'll need to run more tests. Brain scans, cognitive assessments. This is unusual. Unusual was an understatement, Lila thought. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about Daniel, something beyond science or medicine. But for now, all she could do was follow orders. Over the next few days, Daniel underwent a battery of tests. MRI scans, EEGs, even psychological evaluations. Each result came back normal or better than normal. His brain function was flawless. His reflexes sharp, his memory intact, except for those mysterious gaps. The doctors were baffled, but Daniel didn't seem surprised. If anything, he appeared resigned, as if he'd expected nothing less. During this time, Lila became his primary caregiver again. The bond they'd started forming during his coma grew stronger now that he was awake. They talked often, sometimes about mundane things like the weather or the latest news headlines. Other times, their conversations delved deeper. One evening, as Lila helped Daniel sit up in bed, he suddenly blurted out, "Do you believe in parallel universes?" She froze, startled by the question. Parallel universes? Like alternate realities? He nodded. Yes, worlds that exist alongside ours, where different choices lead to different outcomes. I guess it's possible, she said carefully. But why are you asking? He hesitated, staring at his hands. Because I think I might have seen them. Lila's breath caught in her throat. Seen them? While you were in the coma? Yes, he admitted. At least I think so. I can't be sure. But I remember moments. Fragments of lives that weren't mine. Places I've never been. People I don't recognize. And yet, it all feels real. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to dismiss it as nonsense, a side effect of waking up after 3 years. But another part of her believed him. Maybe it was the way he spoke, so earnest and certain. Or maybe it was the look in his eyes, like he'd seen things most people couldn't even imagine. What kinds of things did you see? She asked softly. He leaned back against the pillows, closing his eyes as if trying to recall. Cities floating in the sky. Machines that think like humans. Wars fought with weapons we haven't invented yet. Peaceful worlds where everyone works together instead of tearing each other apart. And which world was yours? She asked, his lips curved into a faint smile. I don't know. Maybe none of them, or maybe all of them. They sat in silence for a while, Lila processing his words. She wanted to ask more questions, but something told her not to push too hard. Whatever Daniel had experienced, it was deeply personal. Something he needed time to understand. As the days passed, Daniel grew stronger. With physical therapy, he regained control of his muscles and learned to walk again. Lila stayed by his side through it all, cheering him on and offering encouragement. In return, he shared more stories about the visions he'd had. Some were beautiful, like the one about a city powered entirely by renewable energy. Others were terrifying, like the memory of a planet ravaged by war and famine. Each tale left Lila wondering, was Daniel truly recalling glimpses of other realities? Or was his mind simply piecing together fragments of imagination? One afternoon, as they sat together in the garden outside the facility, Daniel turned to her with a serious expression. There's something else I need to tell you. Her stomach tightened. What is it? He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. In one of those timelines, I saw the end of the world. Lila's eyes widened. The end of the world? Yes, he said grimly. A global catastrophe. Climate collapse, resource wars, pandemics. Billions dead within a decade. She shivered despite the warm sun on her skin. And you think it's going to happen here? In our timeline? I don't know, he admitted. Maybe, maybe not. But I also saw something else, a chance to stop it, to change the course of history. How? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He reached into the pocket of his robe and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, he revealed a rough sketch of a machine, a complex network of circuits and wires that looked like something out of a sci-fi movie. This, he said, tapping the drawing. It's a neural interface, a device that connects human minds directly to computers, not just to control them, but to enhance empathy, to help us understand each other better. Leela stared at the sketch, her mind reeling. You're saying this thing could save the world? It's not just a thing, he corrected gently. It's an idea, a starting point. But it's possible. I know it is. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Layla gazed at the drawing, trying to wrap her head around what Daniel was proposing. It sounded impossible, far-fetched. And yet, she couldn't deny the spark of hope igniting inside her chest. If you build this, she said finally, what happens next? Daniel smiled, a hint of determination in his eyes. We share it, with everyone. No secrets, no greed. Just a chance to make things better. Leela nodded slowly, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and fear. Whatever lay ahead, she knew. One thing for certain, Daniel Kessler wasn't just a man waking up from a coma. He was a man carrying a message from another world, and maybe, just maybe, he was exactly what this one needed. Would you like me to format this text into a downloadable document such as a Word opening parenthesis .docx or PDF file? If yes, please confirm, and I'll guide you through the process. Daniel's idea was bold, almost too big to comprehend. A machine that could connect human minds, enhance empathy, and maybe even save the world. Lila wasn't sure whether to feel inspired or overwhelmed. But one thing was certain. Daniel believed in it completely, and his conviction was contagious. Over the next few weeks, Daniel threw himself into work. With Lila's help, he began sketching detailed designs for the neural interface. He filled notebook after notebook with diagrams, equations, and notes. Sometimes he would stop mid-sentence, close his eyes, and tap his temple as if trying to pull something from deep within his mind. Then he'd scribble furiously, explaining concepts Lila barely understood, but trusted nonetheless. It's like a bridge, he told her one evening as they sat together in the facility's small library. A way to link people's thoughts and emotions directly. Imagine being able to feel what someone else feels, not just guess or assume, but truly understand. Leela nodded slowly, imagining the possibilities. That could change everything, she said. Wars, arguments, misunderstandings, all gone. Exactly, Daniel replied, his voice tinged with excitement. But it's not just about solving problems. It's about connection. Humanity has forgotten how to connect with each other, with nature, with ourselves. This could remind us. Despite his enthusiasm, there were moments when doubt crept in. Late at night, when the facility was quiet and everyone else had gone home, Daniel would sit by the window, staring at the stars. Leela noticed the sadness in his eyes during those times. What's wrong? She asked him once, sitting down beside him. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I keep thinking about those timelines I saw. The good ones and the bad ones. What if I'm wrong? What if this doesn't work? It will, she said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. You've already come so far. Look at you. You're awake. You're healthy. And you have an idea that could change the world. That's not nothing. He smiled faintly, though. The worry didn't leave his face entirely. Thank you, Lila, for believing in me. As the days turned into weeks, word of Daniel's recovery and his plans began to spread. At first, it was just whispers among the staff. But soon, Reporters caught wind of the story. Cameras appeared outside the facility, and journalists called constantly, asking for interviews. The attention made Lila uneasy, but Daniel handled it with surprising grace. "Ignore them," he told her when she expressed concern. "They can write whatever they want. What matters is what we do here." Still, the scrutiny brought challenges. One day, a man in a sharp suit arrived at the facility, claiming to represent a powerful tech company. He introduced himself as Mr. Grayson and insisted on meeting with Daniel. "He says he wants to invest," Dr. Harper explained to Lila privately, "but I don't trust him." Neither did Lila. There was something cold about Grayson's smile, something calculating in his eyes. When she voiced her concerns to Daniel, he simply nodded. "I'll hear him out," he said, "but I won't compromise." The meeting took place in a private room, with Lila present as a witness. Grayson wasted no time getting to the point. "Mr. Kessler," he began, leaning forward in his chair, "your ideas are remarkable. We'd like to partner with you. Fund your research, bring your vision to life." "That sounds generous." Daniel replied cautiously. "What's the catch?" Grayson smiled thinly. "No catch, just standard terms. Intellectual property rights, profit-sharing agreements. Nothing unusual." "But you'd own it," Daniel said, his tone hardening. "My invention, my idea, it would belong to your company." Grayson shrugged. "That's how these things work. You get resources, funding, exposure. In return, we take care of the business side." "And what happens if I say no?" Daniel asked. Grayson's smile faded slightly. "Then we walk away. Simple as that." For a moment, the room was silent. Lila held her breath, watching Daniel carefully. Finally, he stood up, his expression calm but resolute. "Thank you for your offer," he said, "but I'll have to decline." Grayson's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Daniel replied, "but it's my mistake to make." After Grayson left, slamming the door behind him, Lila let out a sigh of relief. "That was intense," she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Daniel assured her. "People like him always think they can buy their way into anything. But this isn't about money. It's about purpose." Though Grayson's visit was unsettling, it only strengthened Daniel's resolve. He decided to share his work openly, bypassing corporate interests altogether. Using funds from his personal fortune, which he still controlled, despite being in a coma for 3 years, he set up a small lab within the facility. Lila helped him gather supplies and equipment, learning as much as she could along the way. It wasn't easy. Building the neural interface required precision and patience, qualities Daniel possessed in abundance, but which tested Lila's limits. She spent hours reading technical manuals and watching online tutorials, determined to keep up. Whenever she felt discouraged, Daniel encouraged her. "You're smarter than you think," he told her one afternoon as they worked on assembling a prototype. "You just need confidence." She laughed nervously. "Confidence won't stop me from breaking this thing." "It's not about perfection," he said. "It's about progress. Every mistake teaches us something." Their collaboration became a source of joy for both of them. For Daniel, it was a chance to turn his visions into reality. For Lila, it was an opportunity to step outside her comfort zone and discover new strengths. Together, they made steady progress, bringing the neural interface closer to completion. But not everyone supported their efforts. As news of Daniel's project spread, criticism followed. Some accused him of playing God, meddling with forces beyond human understanding. Others dismissed his ideas as science fiction, impossible dreams destined to fail. Even some of the facility staff grew skeptical, whispering behind closed doors. "They don't believe in us," Lila said one evening, frustration evident in her voice. "How are we supposed to convince the world if we can't even convince the people around us?" "We don't need to convince everyone," Daniel replied. Just enough to make a difference. His optimism was infectious, and Lila found herself clinging to it. Still, there were moments when fear crept in. What if they failed? What if the neural interface didn't work? Or worse, what if it caused harm instead of helping? One night, as they worked late in the lab, Lila voiced her fears aloud. What if we're wrong? What if this isn't the answer? Daniel paused, setting down the tool he'd been using. We won't know unless we try, he said softly. And even if we fail, at least we tried. That's better than doing nothing, she nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. You really believe that, don't you? With all my heart, he replied. Because I've seen what happens when we give up. I've seen worlds where hope dies, where people stop trying. I won't let that happen here. His words stayed with her long after they left the lab that night. They reminded her why she'd become a nurse in the first place, to help people. To make a difference, however small. And now, working alongside Daniel, she realized she might have a chance to do more than she'd ever imagined. Weeks passed, and the prototype neared completion. It was a sleek device, smaller than Lila expected, with delicate wires and glowing circuits. Daniel called it the Nexus, a name that seemed fitting somehow. When it was finally ready, they decided to test it themselves before showing it to anyone else. This is it, Daniel said, holding the Nexus in his hands. Are you ready? Lila took a deep breath, nodding. As ready as I'll ever be. They connected the device to their temples, activating it with a soft hum. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, Lila felt a rush of sensations. Images, emotions flooding her mind. She saw glimpses of Daniel's life, his memories, his fears, his hopes. And she realized something profound. Beneath his confidence and determination, he carried a deep loneliness, a longing for connection he'd never fully expressed. At the same time, Daniel experienced Lila's perspective, the struggles she faced, the dreams she cherished, the strength she often doubted. Tears welled up in his eyes as he felt her kindness, her resilience, her unwavering belief in him. When the Nexus powered down, they sat in silence, overwhelmed by what they'd shared. Finally, Lila spoke. That was incredible, she whispered. I've never felt anything like it. Me neither, Daniel admitted. But it works. It really works. They hugged tightly, both knowing this was just the beginning. The Nexus wasn't perfect. It needed refinement, testing, improvements, but it was proof that Daniel's vision could become reality. And with Lila by his side, he knew they could face whatever came next. Would you like me to format this text into a downloadable document such as a Word opening parenthesis .docx or PDF file? If yes, please confirm, and I'll guide you through the process. The success of the Nexus prototype gave Daniel and Lila a renewed sense of purpose. They knew they were on to something extraordinary, but they also realized how much work lay ahead. The device was functional, yes, but it wasn't ready for public use yet. There were technical issues to fix, ethical questions to address, and countless tests to run. Still, the first step had been taken, and that alone felt like a miracle. Word of their progress spread quickly within the facility. Some staff members were skeptical, while others were curious. A few even offered to help, including Dr. Harper, who had initially been cautious about Daniel's ideas. If this works, he told them one day, it could change everything we know about human connection. Daniel nodded, appreciating the support. It's not just about technology, he said. It's about trust. We need people to believe in what we're doing, Lila agreed. And we need to show them why it matters. To do that, they decided to share their story carefully and selectively. They invited a small group of trusted individuals to witness a demonstration of the Nexus. Among them were nurses, doctors, and a few local journalists whose work focused on innovation and science. The room buzzed with anticipation as Daniel explained the concept behind the device. "The Nexus connects minds," he said simply. "Not just thoughts, but emotions. It lets us experience someone else's perspective firsthand." When the demonstration began, everyone watched in silence. 2 volunteers, a nurse named Clara and a young engineer from Daniel's team, connected to the Nexus. For several minutes, they sat quietly, their faces reflecting a mix of surprise, wonder, and emotion. When the session ended, Clara wiped away tears, her voice trembling as she spoke. "I've never felt anything like that before," she admitted. "It's overwhelming, but beautiful." The audience erupted into applause, and Daniel exchanged a glance with Lila. This was it, the moment they'd been working toward. Proof that the Nexus could bridge gaps, foster understanding, and create real connections. But success brought challenges too. As news of the demonstration spread, so did interest and scrutiny. Reporters called constantly, asking for interviews. Tech companies sent representatives, offering partnerships and funding. Even government officials expressed curiosity, though their intentions weren't always clear. They want control. Daniel told Lila one evening as they reviewed another proposal. They see potential, but they don't care about the purpose. "So, what do we do?" she asked. "We stay independent," he replied firmly. "This isn't about profit or power. It's about helping people." To protect their work, Daniel launched an open-source initiative called Tomorrow Now. The goal was simple: share the Nexus design with the world, allowing anyone to contribute, improve, or adapt it. By making the technology accessible, they hope to prevent it from being monopolized by corporations or governments. Open source means transparency. Daniel explained during a press conference. It means collaboration. If we're going to build a better future, we need everyone's input, not just mine. The announcement drew mixed reactions. Some praised Daniel's vision, calling him a visionary and a humanitarian. Others criticized him, accusing him of being naive or reckless. Trolls flooded social media with insults and conspiracy theories. Through it all, Lila stood by his side, defending him whenever necessary. "You can't please everyone," she reminded him one night after reading hateful comments online. "Focus on the people who believe in you." He smiled faintly. "You're right. I couldn't do this without you." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Leila wasn't just Daniel's assistant anymore. She was his partner, his confidant, his anchor. Together, they faced the highs and lows of their journey, leaning on each other when things got tough. One of the toughest moments came when Grayson, the man in the sharp suit, returned. This time, he arrived with lawyers, threatening legal action unless Daniel handed over the rights to the Nexus. "You can't stop progress," Grayson sneered during a tense meeting. "If you won't cooperate, we'll find ways to make you regret it." Daniel remained calm, his expression unreadable. "You can try," he said evenly, "but you won't succeed." After Grayson left, slamming the door behind him, Lila turned to Daniel, her heart pounding. "What are we going to do?" "We fight," he replied simply. "With facts, with ethics, with truth. He can't win if the world sees through his lies." True to his word, Daniel fought back not with aggression, but with transparency. He released detailed documentation of the Nexus's development process, proving that every step had been ethical and independent. Supporters rallied around him, flooding social media with messages of encouragement. Slowly but surely, Grayson's threats lost their power. Through it all, Daniel continued refining the Nexus. Each new version brought improvements, better connectivity, enhanced safety features, and increased accessibility. Lila played a crucial role in testing and feedback, ensuring the device met real-world needs. Her nursing background gave her unique insights, especially when it came to addressing concerns about privacy and consent. It has to be safe, she insisted during one brainstorming session. People need to feel secure using it. Daniel nodded. Agreed. Safety comes first. As the Nexus evolved, so did its applications. Early adopters included therapists, educators, and conflict resolution specialists. One teacher used it to help students understand empathy, while a counselor employed it to bridge communication gaps between estranged family members. Stories of transformation poured in, reinforcing Daniel and Lila's belief in the project. But despite the progress, there were still moments of doubt. Late at night, when the lab was quiet and the weight of responsibility pressed down on them, Lila sometimes wondered if they were moving too fast. What if the Nexus fell into the wrong hands? What if it caused harm instead of healing? One evening, as they worked side by side, she voiced her fears aloud. What if we're playing with fire? What if this changes things in ways we can't predict? Daniel paused, setting down his tools. Every great invention carries risks, he said gently. Fire, electricity, the internet, they all changed the world. And yes, they brought challenges. But they also brought opportunities. Progress isn't perfect, Lila. It's messy, complicated, but it's worth it. She sighed, nodding slowly. I know. I don't want to see anyone get hurt. Neither do I, he replied. That's why we're careful. Why we test, learn, and adapt. We can't eliminate risk entirely, but we can minimize it. His reassurance helped ease her worries, though they never fully disappeared. Building something revolutionary required courage, and courage often meant facing uncertainty head-on. Months passed, and the Nexus gained traction worldwide. Communities formed around the initiative, sharing ideas and collaborating on improvements. Scientists studied its effects, documenting both successes and failures. Critics persisted, but their voices grew quieter as evidence mounted in favor of the Nexus. For Daniel and Lila, the journey became less about proving themselves and more about empowering others. They traveled to conferences, schools, and community centers, spreading their message of hope and connection. Everywhere they went, they saw glimpses of changed people listening more, arguing less, reaching out instead of shutting down. One afternoon, as they prepared for yet another presentation, Lila turned to Daniel with a smile. Do you remember when you first woke up? How lost you seemed? He chuckled softly. How could I forget? Those early days were complicated. Well, she said, look at you now. You've come so far. So have you, he replied, his tone warm. None of this would have been possible without you. They shared a quiet moment, reflecting on how far they'd come and how much further they had to go. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they faced it together, driven by a shared vision of a brighter future. Would you like me to format this text into a downloadable document, such as a word opening parenthesis .docx or PDF file? If yes, please confirm, and I'll guide you through the process. The Nexus was no longer just an idea, it had become a movement. People from all over the world were talking about it, using it, and sharing their experiences. Some called it revolutionary. Others called it dangerous. But no matter what they thought, one thing was clear. The Nexus had sparked a global conversation about connection, empathy, and the future of humanity. For Daniel and Lila, life became a whirlwind of activity. They traveled constantly, meeting with researchers, educators, and community leaders who wanted to learn more about the Nexus. Each trip brought new challenges and opportunities, but through it all, they remained focused on their mission to make the world a better place, one connection at a time. One morning, as they prepared for a flight to New York, Lila glanced at Daniel and noticed how tired he looked. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his shoulders seemed heavier than usual. She knew he hadn't been sleeping well. His mind was always racing, thinking about the next step, the next improvement, the next challenge. "You need a break," she said gently, handing him a cup of coffee. He smiled faintly, but shook his head. "There's no time for breaks. Not now." "Yes, there is," she insisted. "You can't keep pushing yourself like this. You'll burn out." "I'll be fine," he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "Besides, we're close to something big. I can feel it." Lila didn't argue further, but she made a mental note to keep an eye on him. Daniel was passionate and driven, but that same intensity sometimes blinded him to his own limits. She couldn't let him sacrifice himself for the cause not win. So many people depended on him. When they arrived in New York, they were greeted by a crowd of reporters and supporters. The event they were attending, a conference on emerging technologies, had drawn significant attention, thanks in part to the Nexus's growing popularity. As they walked through the bustling convention center, Layla felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was their chance to showcase the Nexus on a larger stage, but it also meant facing tougher questions and higher stakes. During the keynote presentation, Daniel stood confidently at the podium, addressing an audience of hundreds. He spoke passionately about the Nexus's potential to bridge divides, heal wounds, and inspire change. His words resonated deeply, earning thunderous applause. But when the floor opened for questions, things got complicated. A journalist raised her hand, her expression skeptical. "Mr. Kessler, isn't there a risk of misuse? What's stopping someone from exploiting the Nexus for selfish purposes?" Daniel nodded, acknowledging the concern. "Any tool can be misused," he admitted. "But that's why we've built safeguards into the design. Consent is key. No one can use the Nexus without permission. And because it's open source, the community helps monitor and improve those protections." Another question came from a scientist in the front row. "What about psychological effects? Could repeated use alter brain chemistry or emotional stability?" "We're studying that closely," Daniel replied. "Early results are promising, but we're committed to transparency. If risks emerge, we'll address them openly and responsibly." The Q&A session went on for nearly an hour, with Daniel fielding questions ranging from technical details to philosophical debates. By the end, he looked exhausted but satisfied. Leela knew how much these conversations meant to him. They were proof that people cared enough to engage critically with his work. After the conference, they attended a small dinner hosted by a group of academics and innovators. The atmosphere was lively, filled with animated discussions about the Nexus's impact. Lila found herself seated next to a woman named Rachel, a psychologist specializing in trauma therapy. "I've been using the Nexus with some of my patients," Rachel explained. "It's amazing how it helps them process emotions they've struggled to articulate for years." "That's incredible," Lila said, genuinely impressed. "Do you think it could work for everyone?" Rachel hesitated before answering. "Not necessarily. Some people aren't ready for that level of vulnerability. But for those who are, it's transformative." Their conversation stayed with Lila long after the dinner ended. She realized that while the Nexus held immense promise, it wasn't a magic solution. It required patience, trust, and willingness to embrace discomfort. That realization weighed on her as she reflected on their journey so far. Later that night, back at their hotel room, Lila broached the topic with Daniel. "Do you ever worry about setting unrealistic expectations?" she asked. "People might think the Nexus can fix everything overnight." He sighed, leaning back against the couch. "I know it's not a cure-all, but I also believe in its potential. We just have to manage expectations carefully. And take care of yourself too," she added firmly. "You're carrying so much responsibility. Let others help you." He gave her a small smile. "I'm trying, but it's hard to let go sometimes." "Well, try harder," she teased, though her tone was serious. "You don't have to do this alone." Over the next few weeks, Daniel began delegating tasks more often, trusting Lila and their team to handle day-to-day operations. It wasn't easy for him. He was used to being hands-on, but he recognized the importance of balance. Meanwhile, Lila took charge of outreach efforts, connecting with grassroots organizations and advocacy groups eager to adopt the Nexus. One such group was based in Chicago, working with at-risk youth. When they invited Daniel and Lila to visit, they jumped at the opportunity. A program aimed to reduce violence by fostering understanding between rival communities. Using the Nexus, participants shared their stories, fears, and hopes, breaking down barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. "It's like seeing the world through someone else's eyes," one teenager told them during a feedback session. "I never realized how much pain they carried until I felt it myself." Hearing testimonials like these reaffirmed Daniel and Lila's belief in the Nexus's power. Yet, they also reminded them of the challenges ahead. Not everyone embraced the technology willingly. Skeptics argued that forced empathy wasn't real empathy, while critics warned of privacy violations and loss of individuality. To address these concerns, Daniel proposed a global summit, a platform for diverse voices to discuss the Nexus's implications. Scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and ordinary citizens gathered in San Francisco, engaging in spirited debates about the future of human connection. At the summit's closing ceremony, Daniel delivered a heartfelt speech. "The Nexus isn't perfect," he admitted. "It won't solve every problem or erase every conflict, but it gives us a chance to listen, to understand, to grow. And that's worth fighting for." His words echoed through the auditorium, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. For Lila, it was a moment of pride and gratitude. She had watched Daniel evolve from a man lost in uncertainty to a leader inspiring millions. And she knew their journey was far from over. As they left the stage together, Daniel turned to her with a smile. "We did it," he said quietly. "Against all odds, we did it." She squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with emotion. "No, Daniel, we're doing it together." And as they stepped into the bright California sunshine, surrounded by cheers and applause, they both felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would still be challenging, but they faced it with hope, determination, and the unshakable belief that connection could change the world. Would you like me to format this text into a downloadable document such as a Word opening parenthesis .docx or PDF file? If yes, please confirm, and I'll guide you through the process. Months turned into years, and the Nexus became more than just a device. It was a symbol of hope. People around the world used it to bridge divides, heal wounds, and create understanding where there had once been only conflict. Schools incorporated it into their curriculums to teach empathy. Therapists used it to help patients confront trauma. Even governments began experimenting with its potential to resolve disputes peacefully. For Daniel and Lila, life settled into a rhythm of purpose and fulfillment. They no longer traveled as much, choosing instead to focus on refining the Nexus and supporting the communities that relied on it. Their small lab in Phoenix grew into a bustling hub of innovation, staffed by volunteers from all walks of life. Together, they worked tirelessly to ensure the Nexus remained safe, ethical, and accessible to everyone. But despite their success, Daniel couldn't shake the memories of the timelines he glimpsed during his coma. The visions still haunted him, images of worlds torn apart by greed, ignorance, and fear. He often wondered if this timeline would follow the same path, or if the Nexus could truly steer humanity toward a brighter future. One evening, as he sat alone in the lab, staring at the latest version of the Nexus, Lila walked in. She carried 2 cups of coffee and handed one to him with a knowing smile. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," she said softly. He chuckled, though there was little humor in it. Maybe I am. She pulled up a chair. Beside him, sipping her coffee thoughtfully. What's bothering you? He hesitated, unsure how to put his thoughts into words. Finally, he said, I keep thinking about those other timelines, the ones where everything went wrong. What if we're not doing enough? What if the Nexus isn't enough? Leela placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm and reassuring. You can't save the whole world on your own, Daniel, but you've already done so much. Look at what's changed because of you. I know, he admitted, but sometimes it feels like we're running out of time. She nodded, understanding. His fears. The future isn't set in stone. Every choice matters. And right now, millions of people are making better choices because of the Nexus. Her words gave him some comfort, but the uncertainty lingered. That night, as he lay awake in bed, he decided to revisit his old notebooks, the ones filled with sketches and notes from his visions. Maybe, he thought, there was something he'd missed. Something that could guide them further. The next morning, he showed Lila one of the drawings, a strange device unlike anything they'd built before. It looked like a sphere covered in intricate patterns, glowing faintly in the center. What is this? She asked, studying the image closely. I'm not sure, he confessed, but I think it's important. In my visions, it appeared in timelines where humanity thrived, where connection wasn't just personal, but planetary. Planetary? She echoed, raising an eyebrow. He nodded. Imagine a network, not just connecting individuals, but entire ecosystems. Humans, animals, plants all sharing a collective consciousness. Lila's eyes widened. That sounds incredible and overwhelming. It does, he agreed. But maybe it's the next step, a way to ensure balance, harmony. They spent weeks discussing the idea, debating its feasibility and implications. Eventually, they decided to share it with their team, inviting input from scientists, engineers, and ethicists. The response was mixed. Some were excited, others cautious, but everyone agreed was worth exploring. As work on the new project began, Daniel and Lila found themselves growing closer than ever. Their partnership had always been strong, but now it deepened into something more profound. They weren't just colleagues or friends anymore. They were kindred spirits, united by a shared vision of a better world. One afternoon, as they took a break from the lab, they wandered through the garden outside. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of blooming flowers. Birds chirped overhead, and the sun cast golden light across the grass. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been there when you woke up? Lila asked suddenly. Daniel stopped walking, turning to face her. All the time, he admitted. But then I think, maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Maybe you were meant to be there. She smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. That's a nice thought. It's true, he said earnestly. You've been my anchor, my guide. I don't know where I'd be without you. Her heart swelled with emotion, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, impulsively, she reached out and took his hand. He squeezed it gently, his gaze steady and sincere. Thank you, Lila, he whispered, for everything. The months passed quickly, filled with long hours of research, testing, and collaboration. Slowly but surely, the new device dubbed the Harmony Sphere took shape. Unlike the Nexus, which focused on individual connections, the sphere aimed to unify larger systems. Its design was complex, requiring breakthroughs in quantum computing and energy sustainability. But under Daniel's leadership and Lila's unwavering support, the team made steady progress. When the first prototype was ready, they gathered everyone in the lab for a demonstration. The sphere hummed softly, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. As it activated, a wave of energy spread outward, enveloping the room in warmth and light. For a brief moment, everyone felt connected, not just to each other, but to the world beyond. Tears streamed down Lila's face as she experienced the sensation. "This is beautiful," she murmured. Daniel nodded, his own eyes glistening. "It's just the beginning." News of the Harmony Sphere spread rapidly, drawing attention from all corners of the globe. Environmentalists hailed it as a tool to combat climate change. Biologists saw potential for restoring damaged ecosystems. Spiritual leaders embraced it as a pathway to universal peace. Critics remained, of course, but their voices were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of optimism. With the sphere's success, Daniel and Lila decided to step back from the spotlight. They handed over leadership of the initiative to their trusted team, confident that the movement would continue to thrive without them. Instead, they focused on living quieter lives, cherishing the moments they had together. Lila finally opened the wellness clinic she'd always dreamed of, using funds donated by grateful supporters of the Nexus. The clinic offered free services to underserved communities, focusing on both physical and emotional healing. Daniel volunteered there often, finding joy in helping others in simpler ways. On weekends, they escaped to the countryside, hiking through forests and watching sunsets over lakes. They talked about the past, the present, and the future, not in terms of grand visions, but in small, meaningful steps. Life, they realized, wasn't about changing the world overnight. It was about planting seeds and nurturing them with love and care. One evening, as they sat on the roof of the clinic, gazing at the stars, Daniel turned to Lila with a contented smile. "You know," he said, "when I first woke up from that coma, I didn't know who I was anymore. But meeting you, it brought me back to life." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she laughed softly. "Well, someone had to change your diaper." He chuckled, shaking his head. "True, but you did so much more than that. You reminded me what it means to be human." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands and letting the cool night breeze wash over them. Above them, the stars twinkled brightly, infinite and eternal. Somewhere in the vastness of the universe, timelines shifted and danced, each one shaped by choices made and paths taken. In this timeline, their timeline hope burned brightly. Not because everything was perfect, but because people cared enough to try. Because connection mattered. Because love endured. And as Daniel and Lila watched the horizon fade into darkness, they knew they'd done their part. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with courage, with kindness, and with the unshakable belief that even in the darkest moments, light could still shine through. Would you like me to format this text into a downloadable document, such as a Word opening .docx or PDF file? If yes, please confirm, and I'll guide you through the process.